Heartwarming moment. Cleaner discovers crying baby millionaire's life changed in 30 seconds. Sarah, a 32-year-old single mother, had seen tough days when all she could afford to feed her 2 children was a box of macaroni. She scrubbed floors and dusted ornate chandeliers in rich, sprawling mansions, sacrificing sleep and comfort to make sure her kids had enough to eat and a roof over their heads. But amidst her dusting today, something caught her ear, a faint cry piercing through the silence of this extravagant home. Intrigued and anxious, she followed that sound to a dimly lit corner. What she found twisted her heart. A newborn baby lay abandoned in a cardboard box, tiny fists flailing, desperately calling for attention. Time seemed to freeze. Adrenaline surged through her as she rushed over, wrapping the fragile little body in her own jacket. The warmth of the fabric was a desperate comfort against the coldness of neglect. She quickly dialed for help, heart racing, refusing to leave this innocent child alone, consumed by fear and determination. As Sarah cradled the baby to her chest, James, the mansion owner and self-made millionaire, strolled into the room, consumed by thoughts of business. He froze at the doorway when he saw her, his privilege shattered in an instant. The sight of this worn-out cleaner, tears glimmering in her eyes, holding an abandoned life, struck him hard. An emotion he didn't know lived inside him jolted awake, colliding with his reality of wealth and security. "Who did this?" Sarah's voice cracked, breaking the silence like glass. She looked up at James, expecting indignation or sympathy, but only found his confusion. A bubble of privilege had shielded him from the struggles of the world outside, and he stood uncomfortably frozen in time as the cries of the baby echoed, demanding change. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. What about all those kids out there who don't have anyone? Sarah pressed, her voice rising in frustration. You sit here, bathing in luxury, while others like me struggle. Her words hung in the air, between them a lifeline thrown across a vast chasm of privilege. James's heart began to race. For the first time, he found himself questioning the very foundation of his existence. He thought about his ambition, his wealth, the successes that had left a path of loneliness in its wake. Suddenly, the walls of his world felt constricting, suffocating, filled with the weight of what he'd taken for granted. In a moment of shared humanity, they found common ground, contrasting lives full of dreams and misconceptions, hopes and heartbreaks. He didn't just see a cleaner. He saw a warrior, a mother willing to fight for a chance at happiness for her children. She began sharing her struggles, and through her eyes, he glimpsed at the world outside his golden fortress. Questions swirled around them. Could this connection last? Was he prepared to step down from his high throne and make a difference? And as the baby's fresh cries filled the space like an urgent plea, they both stood at a crossroads, faced with the haunting question: what would they do next to rewrite their destinies? James blinked, still grappling with the reality before him. The cries of the baby echoed off the grand walls, a stark reminder of the world he was often too busy to see. He took a step forward, the plush carpet beneath his feet almost foreign as he approached Sarah. There was something undeniably magnetic about her vulnerability, and the fierce love she exuded for this forsaken child. I don't know what to say, he finally stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of desperation and a glimmer of hope. You could start by doing something, anything to help, she urged, the plea thickening her voice. This baby needs a home. There are so many like him. He blinked, the weight of her words shrouding him like a heavy fog. His mind raced. He had spent years building an empire, clawing his way to success, but now he couldn't help but wonder what true success really meant. Was it merely living in excess while others struggled? "I have resources," James started, but hesitated as he felt the disconnect between his world of abundance and Sarah's harsh reality. "Resources?" she replied, disbelief flashing across her features. "What good are resources if they're not used to help others? Right now, this precious child is alone," she said, her arms tightening protectively around the baby. Suddenly, he felt a sense of urgency seep into his veins. The baby's cries seemed to fill his soul with a desperate call to action. What if he did step down? What if he used his fortune to change someone else's life? James took a deep breath, the enormity of the decision weighing heavy on him. "Okay, how can I help?" The question felt foreign yet oddly freeing as it left his lips. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "You can start by getting him to a safe place. A place with people who can care for him until a more permanent solution is found," she said, the hope within her rising ever so slightly. "I can do that. I have connections, people who could assist with the adoption process," he asserted, his voice steadying as determination lit up his features. "But why help? What is in it for you?" she asked. There was a suspicion, a hesitation behind her hope. For a moment, James remained silent. He felt exposed, almost naked before her. "I guess I need to find purpose," he finally admitted. "This moment it's opened my eyes. I don't want to just be another wealthy man. I want to be someone who makes a difference." Sarah studied him, weighing his sincerity, looking for signs of a hidden agenda. She was used to broken promises, empty words. But something in his gaze felt different. It held a promise of change. And the baby squirmed slightly, as if sensing the shift in energy. "Then let us start with this baby," she said, her voice firm yet softening just a bit. As they exchanged plans and possibilities, a thread of connection spun between them. The world outside the mansion continued, but within those walls, a bond forged by immense struggle began to bloom. Suddenly, just as hope lit the dim room, Sarah's phone buzzed on the table, slicing through their moment. Her heart raced as she glanced at the screen, and she paled. "It's my sister," she muttered. "She is not supposed to call me here." James's curiosity hitched. "Is everything okay?" Her fingers trembled as she answered, her face draining of color as the words on the other end echoed news she wasn't ready to hear. "What is wrong?" James ventured, concern clouding his features. "Something happened, I have to go," she stammered, her grip on the baby tightening as if trying to protect him from the storm brewing in her life beyond this moment. "Wait, Sarah," he called after her as she turned to leave, her worry palpable. But she looked back, her voice firm despite the chaos in her heart. "I'll be back. We still need to talk about how we can help this baby." As she hurried out the door, James felt the impact dissipate like smoke. The urgency remained, but the thread connecting them felt thinner, stretched to a breaking point. In that silence, he was left with questions buzzing in his mind. What did she leave behind? What challenges awaited her? And deep within, a new determination burned. If this moment had changed him, he couldn't let her face her battles alone. The mansion felt eerily quiet without her presence, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the beginning of something profound. And as he stood there, staring at the door she'd just exited, he knew he wouldn't allow their journey to end here. What would he discover about himself as he sought to help Sarah and this baby against the odds? The air felt heavy with anxiety as James sat down on the ornate couch, the echoes of urgency still ringing in his ears. The baby's soft whimpers broke the silence, a reminder of the little life that hung in the balance. He glanced around the lavish room, filled with trophies of his success. Each framed picture, each polished surface, the wealth he had amassed suddenly felt like gilded chains weighing him down. In that moment, he realized he had been living in a bubble, looking only at the shiny surface of life while ignoring the struggles happening right outside his door. He picked up a plush toy that sat abandoned on the coffee table, its colors faded, but its eyes still bright. "You're going to be okay, little guy," he whispered to the baby, cradling him carefully in his arms. The child felt fragile yet so powerful, a spark of hope amidst despair. He began to think about Sarah. She had rushed off without giving him any details, leaving him with a tight knot of concern in his stomach. What could have happened that would draw her away so suddenly? He had a wealth of connections, abundant resources, yet with her gone, he felt utterly helpless. His phone buzzed, startling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his assistant, updating him on a high-stakes business deal, something that would typically thrill him. But today, it felt trivial. "Reschedule," he typed back. "I have other priorities." He looked down at the baby, who had begun to settle into his embrace, sinking deeper into the warmth. "That is right. You're my priority now," he said softly, feeling an unexpected rush of compassion that flooded him. In this moment, he realized he wanted to do more than just help him. He wanted to be a part of his journey. Just then, a light knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A tall woman with shoulder-length hair and a clipboard appeared. "Mr. Holloway?" she said, glancing around the overwhelming opulence of the room. "I'm here about the adoption process." James felt both relief and caution flooding his mind. "Yes, please come in." The woman stepped inside, eyebrows raising slightly as she noticed the baby in his arms. "Oh, you're already attached," she said, a smile breaking across her face. "That is a good sign." James nodded, feeling an unexplainable surge of protectiveness. "How soon can we arrange everything?" She settled in the chair opposite him, pulling out some forms. "It's complicated, but the first step is to verify your ability to care for him, and we need whatever it takes, just tell me." His voice was firm. He remembered Sarah's invocation to help. It was a call to action he could no longer ignore. The adoption specialist began listing the requirements, but his mind drifted as he listened. Everything felt daunting yet exhilarating. Could he really be responsible for another life? As she continued speaking, he could hear the faint hum of a song playing in the background, comforting and nostalgic. Memories of his own childhood flashed through his mind, times spent laughing with family, times when love and connection were everything. He suddenly felt a powerful desire to create that environment again, not just for this baby, but for himself too. He needed Sarah's partnership, her vision of a better future. Just as hope burgeoned, the room fell silent again. The sound of the baby's soft breathing filled the air. He looked down, and couldn't he help but smile. This little one had found a way into his heart, and now he needed to find a way into Sarah's world. But the question lingered: would Sarah return? Would they be able to make the impact together they both envisioned? As if the universe was answering him, the front door creaked open, and Sarah stepped back in, her expression more determined than ever. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "What is going on?" she asked, her eyes darting to the adoption specialist. For a heartbeat, he could see the weight of possibility shifting between them. But would it hold? "Sarah," he began, "I think we can really do this together." And then, as if the world had paused, he realized the journey was about to become even more complicated. What would happen next, when hope met fear, and the past tried to echo into the future? James felt a rush of relief wash over him as Sarah stepped inside, her presence grounding him in the whirlwind of emotions surrounding the baby. But he could also see the tension behind her eyes, a mix of determination and something more profound. It was as if she had returned from a storm, trying to navigate the chaos of what lay ahead. "I just got off the phone," Sarah continued, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "There has been some trouble with my sister." Her gaze darted to the baby, and the recognition of what they were about to embark on hovered in the air between them. I was trying to handle it alone, but I can't. Not anymore. What happened? James set the baby gently back into the cradle, a protective instinct surging through him. He reached for Sarah's hand, connection grounding both of them in a moment that felt charged with immense possibility. She's in a rough spot, James. We need to figure out how to get her back on her feet. But her voice faltered, and he squeezed her hand tighter. But if we're going to do this adopting him, we have to do it together. I can't create a family by myself. Her words hung between them, heavy with implication. James thought about the life he had built, the barriers he had put up, and the sudden realization that everything he had learned and all the walls he had erected meant nothing without sharing that experience with someone who mattered. It doesn't matter what we face as long as we face it together, he replied, determination blooming like a flower pushing through concrete. We'll help your sister and make this work. I want to give this baby a chance. He saw a flicker of hope ignite in her expressive eyes, the warmth spreading between them like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. But the fear that crept around the edges of that hope also lingered. Would they be able to manage it all together? The adoption process can be challenging, the specialist chimed in, glancing back and forth between them. We'll have to consider not just this child, but your family situation as a whole. If you want to care for him, you'll need to be ready to share your life as a unit. James felt a tightening in his chest. It was a stark reminder that any commitment extended beyond just the baby. They were being asked to delve deep into their lives, knitting together a new path. I'm ready, he said decisively. We can handle it. But Sarah's gaze flickered away, uncertainty clouding her expression. What if I'm not enough? She whispered, vulnerability creeping into her voice. In that moment, James felt the weight of her words. She had always been his rock, yet the fear that had gripped her now showed how deeply intertwined their fates had become. We're strong together, he reassured, his heart pounding. We're much stronger together than apart. She took a deep breath, and he could almost see the gears turning in her mind. Okay, she said, a faint smile breaking through her uncertainty. I believe we can build this life. But we have to be honest with ourselves and each other about our pasts. Just as they seemed to reconnect, the baby gurgled, drawing their attention back to him. James couldn't help but smile at the tiny human who seemed to sense their shift, an unfiltered joy radiating from his small frame. Look at him, James said, his heart swelling. He's counting on us. Sarah nodded, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. We can do this, but we need to confront everything head-on. The good, the bad, all of it. No more hiding. As they sat together, the echoes of unresolved struggles loomed, but an electric possibility thrummed between them, a shared commitment to carve out a future that felt both daunting and thrilling. Let us start right now, he whispered. I want to know everything. I want all of you. But before Sarah could speak, a sharp knock echoed through the opulent room, slicing through their moment of connection. The uncertainty returned, palpable, pulling the air back, reminding them how fragile this life they were about to embark on would truly be. Who is that? Sarah asked, brows furrowed. Dawn. No, James replied, heart racing. But let us find out. As he stood up, an uneasy tension filled the room. Whatever was behind that door could change everything once again. James approached the door, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He glanced back at Sarah, who sat frozen, worry etched on her face. With a deep breath, he turned the knob and pulled the door open just a crack. The sight before him knocked the wind out of his lungs. Standing on the threshold was a woman, disheveled and tear-streaked, clutching a wobbly young boy by the hand. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and urgency. I'm sorry to barge in, she said, her voice trembling, but I need help. James instinctively glanced back at Sarah, who had risen to her feet, concern flooding her features. "What happened?" he asked, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. The woman swallowed hard, her gaze darting back to the child, as if assessing his safety. "I found him. He was abandoned, left by the side of the road. I thought I could help him find his family." Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath. "But I can't do it alone anymore." For a moment, time seemed to stretch thin. James felt as if he were holding his breath, reality sharpening into vivid focus: the baby in the cradle, the chaos of the woman's distress, and Sarah, standing beside him, resolute and strong. "Bring him inside," Sarah urged, stepping forward. "He needs a safe place, and you need to talk. We can help you." The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly, her eyes glimmering with hope as she walked through the threshold, leading the boy behind her. James's heart ached at the sight. The child couldn't have been more than 4, a scruffy mop of hair framing his face, which bore the marks of fear and uncertainty. "Hey there, buddy," James said gently, kneeling to get at eye level. The boy stared back with wide eyes, uncertain yet curious. "What's your name?" "Riley," he whispered, barely audible. "Riley," James repeated, feeling a warmth spreading within him. "You can stay here with us for a while. You're safe." Sarah knelt beside him, her hand resting softly on the boy's arm, offering a sense of comfort. "We're going to help you, okay?" A flicker of trust crossed Riley's eyes, and he nodded slowly. James glanced up at the woman, who was now standing close to them, tension still etched deeply on her features. "I'm Jenna," she introduced herself, trying to gather her composure. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't just leave him." They brought Jenna and Riley into the living room, where warmth enveloped them like a blanket. The baby in the cradle wiggled, sensing the fresh energy in the room, and gurgled happily. The juxtaposition of the circumstances weighed on James. He exchanged a significant glance with Sarah, who nodded slightly, silently agreeing this was all unfolding for a reason. "Let us figure this out together," he suggested, feeling emboldened by their shared commitment to forge ahead into the unknown. They settled in a circle on the floor. Jenna looked over her shoulder, still glancing worriedly toward the exit, as if fearful someone might come for the boy. "I just want him to have a family," she whispered, her hands trembling in her lap. "Riley, do you want to join our family for a little while?" Sarah asked gently, her voice soothing like honey. "We're working on something special." "I'd like that," Riley replied, his small voice coming out stronger now. James felt a swell of emotion at the innocent reply, a connection forming in the most unexpected way. They had aimed to adopt, but this was about connection, and healing in its rawest form. "That's a start," he said, looking at Sarah, who smiled softly back at him, courage mixing with hope in their shared gaze. He knew they were about to confront every complication ahead, but something told him they could face any storm together. As they sat together in the dim light, the reality of what lay before them began to settle in. This child, this woman, their futures were now entangled. Just when they believed they were ready to take the leap into family life, the universe had thrown them a diversion that felt almost impossible to navigate. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her eyes glistening with concern. "I think we start with being there for them," James replied, determination flooding his voice once again. "But I also want to know more about what happened to Riley. And about you, Jenna." Before Jenna could respond, another knock came at the door. A harder, more insistent thud reverberated through the room, making the 4 of them tense. A feeling of dread settled in the air. The uncertainty returned, as if the world outside was about to breach their fragile sanctuary. "Should we answer?" Jenna asked, her voice a whisper now. "Yes," James replied, taking a steadying breath. "Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." He stepped forward, poised to find out what lay beyond that door, heart racing, ready for another turn in the bewildering path they now walked. James steadied himself at the door, glancing back at the room filled with uncertainty and hope. The faces of Jenna, Riley, and Sarah blurred together in his peripheral vision. The knock had rattled him, like an unwanted storm breaking the calm. He hesitated only for a moment before turning the knob. As he swung the door wide, the chill from the outside nipped at his skin, but it was the cold that sent shivers down his spine. Standing on the porch was a man, heavy-set and scowling, with a wild tangle of hair and eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. "Where is she?" the man demanded, his voice rough like gravel. "Who?" James asked, trying to mask the concern creeping into his tone. "Jenna!" he shouted, stepping closer, eyes darting past James as if searching for her. "I know she is here." Jenna shot up from her spot on the floor, her breath catching as she exchanged unsure glances with James and Sarah. "No!" "Wait," she cried, but it was too late. The man was already inside, past James, looming over them. Who is this guy? James thought, his mind racing. Protective instincts flared, urging him to place himself in front of Jenna and Riley. He could feel the weight of the boy's small hand gripping his leg like a lifeline. "Luther, stop!" Jenna yelled, moving to intercept the man. "You can't just barge in like this. I told you I'm done." Luther's expression twisted into one of anger, but he paused when Riley suddenly let go of James. The boy took a timid step forward, fear clouding his features. "Dad?" he whimpered, then began to tremble. James couldn't help but glance sideways at Sarah, who was wide-eyed, clearly processing the new developments. "No, it's not him," Jenna pleaded, her voice more desperate now. "You're not his father anymore." "Who said you could take him?" Luther spat, directing his fury at Jenna as he glared at the child, as if he'd just spotted something precious in someone else's possession. "He is my son." James straightened, letting the protective barrier of his body create distance between Luther and the boy. "You can't just claim him," James said firmly, his voice steady, though inside he felt a whirlwind of concern. "He needs stability, not chaos." "Stability?" Luther started to laugh harshly. "You think she can give him a family? You think you can? Look at this place. You're just a couple of wannabe parents pretending to play house. You have no idea what he needs." Riley's eyes grew wider, tears forming as he took another small step back toward James, seeking comfort and safety. James could feel a knot tightening in his stomach. Any moment spent in the presence of that man felt wrong, toxic. "Riley, doesn't he deserve to be treated like a chess piece, moved around on your board?" he said, raising his voice slightly while still keeping calm for the child's sake. "If you want to see him, you need to take a step back and figure this out without scaring him." Jenna nodded and stepped in closer to Riley, crouching down to his level. "You're safe here, Riley. No one is taking you anywhere," she promised softly, her own eyes glistening with resolve. Luther's rage simmered, but under it, confusion brewed. He turned back to Jenna, desperation creeping into the corners of his voice. "What are you doing? You can't just pretend this is a game." "It's not a game," Jenna replied, her voice firm yet gentle. "I'm giving him a chance, a real one. You need to face your responsibilities, not hide behind anger." James felt a surge of pride as the invalidation of Luther became abundantly clear. But even in that moment, a sense of dread tugged at his heart. What if Luther decided to fight dirty? What if he didn't back down? Suddenly, without warning, a commotion erupted outside. Tires screeched, and voices shouted, slicing through the tension like a knife. James's pulse quickened. Was this fight about to escalate beyond words? "I want him!" Luther yelled again, his patience fraying, the warning signs clear. At that moment, James knew that the sanctuary they had felt just moments before was starting to crack, fractured by fear, by the unexpected ties of family, and by the choices that lay just beyond that door. Could they protect Riley from whatever storm Luther was about to unleash? He turned his gaze back to Sarah, her eyes wide with concern. In that instant, they both knew there was no turning back. "Stay close," he whispered to Riley, clutching the boy's small hand tightly. James took a deep breath, ready to brace for whatever was coming next. The noise outside intensified, like a swarm of bees buzzing with anxiety. James held Riley's hand tightly, feeling the quickening pulse in the boy's little fingers. Jenna's face paled, and her eyes darted between Luther and the door where chaos stirred. The once safe haven of their home felt fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of a table. "Stay behind me," James said to Jenna, taking a step closer to her. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on him, the urge to protect them all pulsating through him. Luther's fervor seemed to amplify in the chaos. "You think you can just take him from me?" he shouted, his voice hoarse with desperation. "You think a couple of days in your cozy little place will make you a mother?" James clenched his jaw. He doesn't need you to be his father right now. He needs someone who cares." Riley, still trembling, peered around James, his large eyes reflecting fear and confusion. James knelt down, searching for a glimmer of calm in the storm. "Hey, buddy, look at me," he urged, softening his tone. "We're going to be okay. I promise. Just stay close." But Riley didn't respond, too caught up in the swirling emotions around him. Then, with a sudden crash from behind, the front door burst open wider. A pair of uniformed figures stormed into the house, their badges gleaming. The sudden appearance of the police turned the air electric. "What is going on here?" one officer demanded, quickly assessing the tension. James felt a flicker of hope. Thank goodness, he thought, but Luther's gaze hardened, his once blustery bravado now wrapped in uncertainty. "Get out!" he barked at the officers, waving his arms dismissively. "This is a family matter." "Sir, we need to know what is happening," one officer replied, stepping forward, her posture authoritative. "Riley would be better off with me," Luther insisted, eyes blazing as he looked around the room, trying to assert control amid the unfamiliar authority. "You can't just play house with a child who has a father." "Maybe we should ask the child what he wants," another officer suggested, glancing at Riley, who stood frozen beside James, confusion etched on his face. Jenna took a deep breath, her voice steadier now. "Riley deserves a choice. He deserves to feel safe." Luther scoffed. "Safe? In a place where he has to hide from his own father?" James stepped closer, ready to intervene. "No, he needs protection from toxic relationships. This isn't what a father looks like." As the words hung in the air, he felt the weight of Riley's small hand squeeze his tightly. Luther's anger boiled over, but the officers didn't budge, their presence a solid barrier against his volatile emotions. The tension grew thick, a feeling that something monumental was about to happen. James felt his heart thud loudly in his chest, entrapped in the relentless tug-of-war between parenthood and protection. "Riley," the female officer said gently, kneeling down to the boy's level, "we're here to help you. Can you tell us how you feel?" Riley opened his mouth to speak but paused, the turmoil in his eyes revealing a struggle for words. The air felt thick with potential. I want to be safe," the boy finally whispered, and James felt the emotion crack through his whole being. The spell of the moment broke as Luther's face fell, the determination gone. James exchanged glances with Jenna, seeing something shift between them, a flicker of shared understanding and resolve. But Luther wasn't ready to back down yet. "This isn't over," he spat, rage still bubbling. "You can't keep him forever." The police exchanged meaningful looks, indecision etched on their faces. James braced himself, recognizing that this was only the beginning. They were standing on a precipice, a line that could lead them to safety or chaos. James looked at Riley, who still appeared lost but somehow more resolute. What came next would define their future, but the stakes were higher than ever. "Don't worry, little man," James whispered softly. "We won't let anyone take you. Not now." As the officers began taking statements, a new thought crossed James's mind. What if Luther had allies? What if this battle stretched beyond this moment? His heart raced. Their fragile peace hung by a thread. Would they be able to rise against whatever forces were lurking, ready to strike, just beyond those doors? As the tension in the room mounted, it felt like the walls were closing in, constricting the air. James could see the worry etched deep on Jenna's face as she held her breath, every instinct in her body telling her things were about to turn ugly. "Let us get some answers," the female officer said, her voice firm as she motioned to her partner. Together, they attempted to guide Riley away from the emotional battlefield unfolding before them, but he remained rooted to the spot, an island of vulnerability in a roaring sea of chaos. "Riley, it's okay," James urged gently, crouching closer to his level. "Just go with them for a moment. They need to make sure you're safe." He hoped his voice would lure the boy from the fear that gripped him so tightly. But Riley's eyes darted from James back to Luther, whose rage was palpable. "Riley, I'm your father!" he bellowed, desperation cracking through his voice. "You can't listen to them. You can't trust them." The officers took a step towards Riley, attempting slowly to include him in their narrative of safety. "We just want to talk, sweetie," the female officer reassured him, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frantic energy that permeated the room. "We want to help you. Can you come with us?" Despite the comfort in her voice, Riley hesitated, caught in a crossfire of confusing emotions. Would staying with James and Jenna protect him better than going with someone he had barely known? James felt an intense wave of helplessness. "Riley," he said softly, "you're not alone. We're right here." He offered an encouraging smile, longing to shield the boy from the pain swirling around them. Luther exploded, a sudden outburst deafening in the fragile silence. "I'll take this to court. You think I'll let you take him from me? I'll fight." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They were clearly aware of the escalating situation, but James could see the steam building behind Luther's eyes. "This isn't a game, Luther," he countered, tense but firm. "A child's safety is at stake. Just back off." "Who do you think you are?" Luther screamed, his face flushed with fury. "You're just some guy playing hero. He's my boy." Then, in a flash, Riley's voice cut through the madness, firm and clear. "I want to be with James and Jenna. They make me feel safe." The room froze. James felt the shaky weight on his shoulders lighten slightly, hope coursing through him. Riley had found his voice. Riley Luther's voice trembled, caught between fury and defeat. With a final hurrah of resistance, he glanced at the officer. "You can't let a child decide. What do you even know about him?" "About me? You think you know your child?" Jenna interjected, stepping in, the anger burning bright in her eyes. "You think your control means love? Look at him. He is terrified, and that as you're doing." Luther's facade began to crumble, the fire in his eyes dimming like a dying ember. "But I'm his father," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The officer stepped closer to Riley, kneeling once more. "Riley, you have the right to speak up," the female officer soothed, clearly aware of the emotional weight resting on the boy's shoulders. "You're the one who knows best about what you need. Will I be safe if I go with them?" Riley's voice was small, but the question carried a weight far beyond his years. James felt his heart race again. He wanted nothing more than to wrap Riley in his arms and promise him everything would be all right. "You will be safe with us, buddy. I promise." But Luther wasn't backing down without a fight. "I'm not letting you all take him. This isn't over I swear. As the officers eyed Luther cautiously, James realized the battle had just begun. The intensity of being a protector was one thing, but the reality of fighting against a father, no matter his flaws, could prove complicated in the law's eyes. James looked to Riley, who met his gaze with wide, uncertain eyes. "I wish I was brave," Riley whispered, and in that moment, a rush of emotion surged through James as he thought about courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear, little man, James said, squeezing Riley's small hand tightly again. "It's feeling afraid, but still choosing to speak your truth. And you've done that." As the tension started to shift, James felt something crack inside him, something both terrifying and freeing. They had taken the first step towards safety, but what awaited them beyond this moment remained a shadowy uncertainty. Could they hold on to that fragile hope as more chaos approached? James braced himself, knowing another storm was about to hit. The air in the room hummed with anticipation. Each second felt stretched tight, like a taut string just waiting to snap. Riley stared at the officers, a mixture of fear and yearning flickering in his young eyes. This was the point of no return. He could make a choice, but it felt monumental, almost like selecting the path that would shape his life forever. James moved closer, his heart pounding. "Riley, this is your decision," he said gently, but urgency laced his voice. "You deserve a home where you feel safe." Luther's eyes were wild, darting between Riley and the officers, frustration coursing through him like a dangerous current. "Don't let him fool you," he shouted, venom in his tone. "He doesn't know what he wants. He is just a kid." Riley shrank back, his small hands trembling. The clash of voices seemed to envelop him, and for a moment, he lost sight of everything but the chaos surrounding him. A single tear streamed down his cheek. "Riley." Jenna's voice softened, as she crouched down to his level, her gaze steady and warm. "You can come with us, and we'll take care of you. We won't let anyone hurt you. You deserve to feel safe, every day." Safe, the word hung in the air, heavy, with deeper meaning than any child should have to bear. Riley took a shaky breath. "I want to be safe," he mumbled, almost to himself, as if the weight of that realization was starting to settle in his heart. The officers exchanged a glance, a moment of understanding passing between them. They could sense the shift, the pivotal moment in this battle for Riley's future. "We know this is hard, sweetie," the female officer said softly, "but your voice matters. You're allowed to choose what happens next." Luther stepped forward, desperation etched into his features. "Riley, please. I can change. I swear I can do better. I'm your father. We can work through this." For a heartbeat, Riley wavered, the bond of blood pulling at him. He cast a fearful glance at Luther, the man who had been everything and nothing to him. But then he looked at James and Jenna, and all the warmth they offered flooded his chest. "I want to go with James and Jenna," he said firmly, the tremor in his voice now replaced with a resolve that startled even him. Barely able to contain her relief, Jenna reached for Riley, wrapping him in a tender embrace, her heart swelling with pride. The officers nodded, affirming the decision. "Let us get you out of here for now, Riley. You're safe with us," the male officer said, glancing at Luther, whose eyes brimmed with betrayal and desperation. "No!" Luther shouted, his fury igniting once more. "You can't just take him. This isn't finished." James felt an acute pain in his chest at Luther's plea, knowing that beneath his anger was a father's brokenness, but they could not let that voice overshadow Riley's needs. Just as James tried to guide Riley toward the exit, Luther lunged forward, desperation turning to aggression. "Riley!" he yelled once more, every ounce of panic in his voice. "You're not going anywhere." In the crowded chaos, the officers reacted immediately, stepping in between Luther and the boy. "Step back," they demanded, their authority now resonating in the room. James instinctively tightened his grip on Riley, pulling him closer to his side. "No one is taking him, Luther," James said with a firm conviction that shocked even him. "You need to let go. It's time." But rather than settling down, the atmosphere escalated. The officers turned their attention to Luther, ready to intervene if necessary, while Jenna kept her gaze on Riley, whispering calming words, reminding him he was safe. James's heart raced, the stakes rising as he glanced at each face in the room. What would happen next? Could they truly protect Riley from the storm brewing around them? Luther's wild moments of rage threatened to spiral, and James knew this wasn't over yet. As Riley's worried gaze met his, James could feel it, the undeniable connection they shared, a bond formed in the heat of a tense moment. "You're brave, Riley. I believe in you." But as the distant sound of sirens wailed in the background, a new uncertainty loomed over them. How long could they hold on to hope before the darkness came crashing down again? The weight of the moment pressed around them, and James braced for the next wave that was sure to follow. What other battles lay ahead, and were they ready to face them together? James held Riley's small hand tightly, feeling each shallow breath the boy took. The urgency in the air was palpable. It crackled like static electricity. Then, the police officers moved closer to Luther, creating a protective barrier between him and the family they were desperately trying to form. "Enough," the female officer declared. Her authoritative voice rang out as she addressed Luther. "You need to step back. This situation is under control, and we need you to cooperate." Luther glared, the wildness in his eyes morphing into confusion and anger. "I want to just stand by while you take my son," he shouted, his voice breaking. "You have no idea what he means to me." James felt a heaviness in his chest. Luther's connection as a father grazed a fine line between toxicity and love. Riley's expression, caught between fear and hope, echoed the turmoil all around him. "How does your love look to Riley?" Jenna interjected, her voice steady amid the storm. "You can't force him to love you or be a good father. Real love doesn't scare. A real father fights for their child's well-being, not against it." Riley clenched James's hand tighter, a small gesture of reassurance, but it felt monumental. In that moment, James realized they were battling for more than just Riley's physical safety. They were fighting for his emotional wellness, for a chance to rewrite a narrative tainted by fear. The chaos heightened when the police officer used their radio to call for backup. In the distance, sirens wailed louder, an impending sense of relief sweeping through James. Help was on the way, but there was still danger in the air, danger that loomed like a storm cloud ready to descend. "Riley," James said softly, kneeling down, his heart open and vulnerable. "You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you. You can be with us. We want you." Before Riley could respond, Luther exploded again, his voice filled with palpable grief. "I can change. Give me a chance." The pleading look in his eyes was raw, his desperation spilling over into sorrow, drawing some public sympathy even as it repulsed others. But anger flared in James. "And how many chances does it take for a child to feel safe?" he demanded, his voice stronger now. "Love isn't about selfish desires, it's about real actions. Who have you been for Riley? Who have you been when it counted?" Riley squeezed James's hand again, his eyes widening as he silently urged James to protect him. Just then, a group of uniformed officers burst through the door, adding strength to the scene. The tension was thick, fruit ripening under pressure. "What is the situation?" one asked, surveying the emotional battlefield. Before anyone could respond, Jenna stepped up to them, heart racing but unwavering. "Luther here seems to think he can dictate where Riley goes, but we believe Riley deserves to make that choice." The officers exchanged wary glances but nodded, clearly on board with their commitment to the child's well-being. You do have rights as a parent, but those rights are overshadowed by a child's safety, an officer added. James felt a glimmer of hope ignite in his chest. They were all united now, bolstered by shared determination. Then let us make that decision clear, he said, rounding on Riley, who still held onto his hand like a lifeline. You've spoken up, buddy. You said you wanted to stay with Jenna and me. Is that still what you want? Riley nodded slowly, the timid resolve shining in his eyes. Yes, then we're going to protect your choice, James promised, imposing strength in his voice to cut through the chaos. Nobody will force you anywhere. At that moment, the ground shivered beneath him. Luther's face twisted, eyes wild with a mixture of rage and fear, as he felt the walls of his world crumbling. The officers moved closer, positioning themselves as a protective barrier. Sympathy and resilience radiated from Jenna as she turned to Riley. You deserve to feel at home, safe and loved. Whatever comes next, remember you're not alone anymore. That reassurance wrapped around Riley like a warm embrace. Just then the police officer turned to Luther. Sir, we're advising you to calmly step outside and allow us to mediate this situation. You need to understand the importance of Riley's voice in this. You can't take him. Luther shouted desperately, a plea born of panic. Actually, the officer countered, while you do have a right to your son, those rights don't come at the expense of his safety. We're here to ensure he makes the decision that is best for himself. James felt a rush of adrenaline as the weight of the situation shifted. Luther's anger warped into confusion, a final chance for him to confront the reality he had evaded. But just as the officers began to escort Luther to the door, he turned quickly, his voice breaking with a mix of vulnerability and despair. Riley. For a fleeting moment, Riley's eyes met his father's, wrestling with the mix of familial loyalty and the hunger for safety. Be brave, Riley, James encouraged softly, squeezing his small hand, his heart pounding. With resolve, Riley spoke louder now. I want to be with James and Jenna. As those words echoed around them, the tension crumbled like old plaster off the walls. A resolute silence filled the room. Luther hesitated, grappling with the realization that his authority was slipping through the cracks. Perhaps on some level, he understood what they were doing, what they were building together. Let us go, the officer said to Luther, leading him away. For everyone's safety, you can voice your concerns to child services or in court. But for now, we'll protect this child. As Luther's figure disappeared into the distance, a weight lifted from the room. James knelt, pulling Riley close, trembling with equal parts fear and triumph. You did it, buddy. You spoke your truth. You're such a brave kid. Tears glistened in Riley's eyes, a mix of relief and fear finally spilling forth. I'm scared, he whispered, burying his face in James's shirt. James wrapped his arms around him, holding him tightly. I know. I'm scared too. But you're safe now. You've got us. Jenna joined them, enveloping both James and Riley in a comforting embrace. Together, we can face whatever comes next, I promise. Together, they echoed, breathing in that fragile new reality. The chaos outside began to dissolve as the police continued their work. In the heart of their struggle, emotional wounds felt raw, yet a glimmer of hope urged forward. Look at us, James said, brushing Riley's hair back gently. We're starting a new story, one filled with love and courage. And as the daylight filtered through the windows, illuminating their little circle of newfound family, James couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they could weather any storm that life hurled their way. This was the moment they had needed, a moment of transformation, possibility blooming against all odds. Let us build that family, Jenna smiled, her heart shining through, where we all feel safe. And as they leaned into each other's warmth, hearts full of hope, they knew they could face whatever stood on the horizon together. This was their beginning, the dawn of a new life, intertwined with love, courage, and the promise of tomorrow. Now, as you've journeyed with us today, you need to subscribe now to our channel. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and comment below your reactions and feelings about this ending. Together, let us create a community that supports one another.